Concussions in football. Why our country's soldiers may also be at risk.
Very common that these folks come back. They are not the same, and in some very real sense, they are not the same person they were before.
We'll share the possible link between PTSD and CTE. Plus, tens of millions of Africans are in need of surgical care. Dr. Paul Osteen and Care Thielander joined us to discuss global medical missions on today's 700 Club Interactive. Welcome to the show. A new study shows suicide rates have increased 30% since 2000. Add in the rising number of opioid drug-induced overdoses, and needless to say, those factors lower the country's overall life expectancy.
Well, the big question is why? One explanation could be CTE, a brain injury associated with repeated hits to the head that happen in games like football. But as CBN Health reporter Lori Johnson tells us, this condition is far more wide-reaching than originally thought.
Many people couldn't understand why a Super Bowl standout with a $40 million contract would murder someone, then commit suicide at age 27. But when scientists autopsied the brain of Aaron Hernandez and discovered an extremely severe case of CTE, his erratic behavior made more sense.
There is no safe blow to the human head.
Dr. Bennett Amalu was one of the first doctors to raise awareness about chronic traumatic encephalopathy, better known as CTE. He says hits to the head damage the area of the brain responsible for decision-making and judgment.
It could present with changes in personality, mood disorders, becoming a drug addict, an alcoholic. You have a much higher risk of engaging in self-harm, attempting suicides, and even committing suicides.
Dr. Amalu's medical contributions led to the groundbreaking movie Concussion, starring Will Smith.
Tell the truth.
While Amalu says the film's content was accurate, the title was misleading.
Concussions do not cause CTE. What causes CTE is blows to your head with or without symptoms. With or without a helmet. Helmets do not protect your brain from CTE.
Dr. Amalu says in just one season of practices and games, players can suffer hundreds of violent blows to the head.
Studies have shown that if your child plays football, that just after one season, there's a reasonable probability that your child had suffered irreversible brain damage. So over the years, it accumulates.
Boston University's CTE Center houses hundreds of brains of deceased football players and others from all walks of life.
20% of our cases, the donors have never had a witnessed, diagnosed, or reported concussion in their lives, yet have CTE at the end of the day.
Dr. Lee Goldstein and his colleagues found CTE in nearly all former football players they studied. What's possibly more disturbing is they also found the condition in brains of military veterans exposed to explosions, but who had not suffered a concussion.
We were very surprised by this and very confused.
So they went back to the lab.
This is the shock tube. It perfectly simulates in mice what IED blasts do to soldiers. All of the animals tested developed CTE. But what's interesting is none of them had concussions. In fact, they seemed perfectly fine afterward.
We were able to figure out what happens in blast, and that is the head is moving very, very quickly, and it's that head motion, we call it the bobblehead effect, that causes the damage that leads to CTE.
That raises the possibility that battle-worn soldiers may have CTE rather than the often diagnosed post-traumatic stress.
Very common that these folks come back. they are not the same. And in some very real sense, they are not the same person they were before. In fact, the front part of the brain may be damaged, and in that respect, they really are different people.
According to Dr. Goldstein, there are likely many other types of people beyond vets and athletes suffering from this brain trauma.
Homeless populations, people who are chronically mentally ill, people who are at risk for domestic abuse, intimate partner abuse, child abuse, elder abuse, incarcerated populations, populations at risk for violence, people in poverty.
CTE can only be confirmed after death. And while there is not yet a cure, scientists are developing a test to diagnose it in the living, which could lead to a treatment. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Well, it's a disturbing report, and it's certainly every parent needs to take this very seriously. When you have a medical doctor who discovered this condition saying just one season of football can lead to irreversible brain damage, it gives us all pause. But it's not just football, it's anything with a repetitive head movement or repetitive head injury. So start thinking about headers in soccer. The list starts to really grow, and we need to take a very hard look at that. And I would say, as a parent, if I'd known any of these things, then contact football would have never been on the agenda for my children.
Yeah, and your son actually had experience.
Yeah, he had a concussion, and it put him out for that season. They had a concussion protocol, but just it doesn't need a concussion. It just needs, you know,
jarring.
What are you
almost,
doing?
Like a, yeah.
Yeah. Are you hitting helmet to helmet? If you are, stop.
Yeah. Well, up next, nearly 60 million people in Africa need surgical care. Doctors Paul Osteen and Keir Thielander will join us to discuss the enormous need and how you and I can make a difference. Don't go away. Well, here in America, you and I are blessed to have access to health care. Let me give you an example. In one zip code in Houston, you'll find 2,500 physicians. Now, compare that to Western Zambia, roughly the size of Louisiana, where several years ago, Dr. Paul Osteen learned he was the only qualified surgeon. It was then that he realized God was calling him to make a difference.
56 million people in Africa are in need of surgical care, and many are dying because of the lack of it. Dr. Paul Osteen is the founder of M3 Mobilizing Medical Missions. Dr. Keir Thielander is the CMO of the Pan-African Academy of Christian Surgeons. Together, they are addressing this healthcare crisis. The upcoming M3 Mobilizing Medical Missions Conference brings together doctors, nurses, dentists, and anyone wanting to make a difference in meeting these pressing needs.
Doctors Paul Osteen and Keir Thielander join us now. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Paul, let me start with you. Go back to that moment in Zambia. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was an interesting moment because I'd been there 3.5 months, and you work hard, and a lot of the people come across the floodplains from Angola. They cross the Zambezi River by canoe to get to us. And as I was leaving, one of the surgeons from Lusaka had flown out to do some cleft lips, and he said, "Paul, do you realize you're the only surgeon here in this an area, qualified surgeon in the area the size of Louisiana?" 36 hours later, I was landing in Houston, and I could oversee the medical center. Wow. And I felt like God just birthed something there. What if we connected the resources we have in Houston or in America with the under-resourced and underserved portions of the world that many people don't know still exist?
Yeah, and many doctors and nurses want to go and make a difference in a place where everything they do matters. Keir, let me ask you, how serious is the problem in Africa? I know it's not just Africa, but there are many, many needs there.
Yeah, it's an enormous problem. You can say on any given day, there's 56 million or more people that need surgery.
Wow.
That's people that here in our country, in the U.S., would have already had surgery or be on the schedule. Yeah. But many of them have no hope.
Not even a possibility of it.
Yeah, it's probably 90% that don't have access in sub-Saharan Africa. 90% don't have access to safe, timely, and affordable surgical care.
Paul, tell me a little bit about the M3 Medical Missions Organization.
Yeah, from that defining moment several years ago, God just birthed this idea of the M3 conference, Mobilizing Medical Missions Conference. We have 3 goals, really. Number 1, to connect people who have a heart to serve. So if you're a healthcare provider, or if you just have an interest in missions, come and connect with other people. Number 2, let them be inspired by people who are out in the field doing the work. Not people that have theories, but people that are really doing the work, like Dr. Thielander. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing is, as they walk around that big bowl, there's 70 exhibitors, and they all need people to help. Mm-hmm. Credible organizations with sustainable efforts. And we just pray that God, as they walk around that bowl, we pray that God would birth something in their heart, and they might take the first step or the next step that He has for them.
Well, it's like laying the opportunity at their feet, right?
Well, as I said before, I want to provide people the opportunity that I didn't have.
Yes. Now, Keir, you're the CMO of PACS. What is that, and what do you all do?
Yeah, so PACS is the Pan-African Academy of Christian Surgeons. We do training and discipleship. It's really a surgical training model based on the U.S., but then also a discipleship component. So we're training Christian African physicians to become surgeons and fully devoted followers of Christ.
What are some of the challenges you face in that?
So in that aspect, you can imagine the cross-cultural component is a significant challenge. There's lots of times where we kind of go like this, one's up, one's down, and we aren't maybe speaking the same language, both figuratively and literally. But there's the other challenge is just the enormous need, balancing the need with the time for training. It's a big difficulty for many of our trainers that are on the ground.
And do you have all of the supplies and the tools that you need to do this well and to give them every chance to be successful?
God provides what we need. Whether we have everything that we think we need, absolutely not. Do we have the things that God knows we need? We do. We do. And so it's amazing what the desire to really provide good care can overcome in terms of lack of resources. But could we use more? Absolutely, we could use more.
What are some of the ways that people can get involved, Paul? I know there are many like me who are listening and saying, boy, we want to change those numbers, get that stat to be different. What do we do?
Well, first thing I'd say is just pray and ask God to change your heart, or keep that burning in your heart, because that desire to help the world I think we can't be comfortable in America or in Western society. We need to look through the lens of a suffering world. So maybe just ask God to keep that in your heart and mind. And I would just encourage people, if you're a follower of Jesus, you can hear His voice. Just be listening for that voice, and He may nudge you to take the next step. It may be there locally. You can't neglect your Jerusalem. I can't be so concerned about Africa that I forget about the needy and the homeless and the refugee population in Houston. So, He may allow you to start there, but whatever it is, take that next step that God's prompting your heart to do. You're His follower. You can hear His voice, listen for it, and obey.
And I know you need financial support in what you're doing.
Every missionary now, the financial support is not for me. It's to help people like Keir and their organizations. We want to help as many people as we can, spread this word, and also make a difference in places where it's really needed.
So tell me about the conference that's happening. When and where? February
22nd, 23rd, Houston, Texas, Lakewood Church. We'd love for you to come Friday and Saturday to the conference, stay over for church if you want to on Sunday, and just make it a weekend of it.
Wonderful. Well, it's a great opportunity for people who are interested both in supporting and in connecting, possibly going, maybe having some of the tools that you need. If you'd like more information on the M3 Global Health Conference, go to cbn.com. It's all outlined there, and we just highly encourage you to support what these two gentlemen are doing. It's life-changing. It's world-changing. We thank you for your commitment to all of that.
Thank you.
Gordon, over to you.
Coming up, a teenage gangster hits the streets with one goal in mind.
It was an outlet for me to express total anarchy. So if I was going to be evil, I became very evil.
See why this evil teen was no match for his own aunt when we return. Alexander was a teen staring down 20 years of hard time. His rap sheet included robbery, burglary, and kidnapping, and he was getting ready to have the book thrown at him. But as he was waiting to be sentenced, Alexander witnessed something unexpected, a miracle in a courtroom.
By the time I hit maybe about 11 to 12 years old, I was already getting arrested. And by 14, I'm sitting in a juvenile detention center facing at least 1 year in prison.
Alexander Pagani grew up on the streets of the Bronx. His parents were involved in the drug culture. and Alexander quickly decided he was on his own.
I felt completely rejected and totally embraced that sense of orphan or abandonment. And I just lived for myself. Like, it's just me, and I'm gonna do whatever I have to do to survive, just me.
For Alexander, survival meant joining a gang.
It appealed to me because it was an outlet for me to express total anarchy.
His goal was dominance, so he lived life to the extreme.
I remember exaggerating that street lifestyle when I didn't have to, or feeling like I did have something to prove. So if I was gonna be evil, I became very evil.
Alexander's extended family tried to reach out and reason with him, especially his Christian grandmother.
I would tell my grandmother, come on, Ma, don't start with that church stuff. I'll go when I'm ready.
By the time Alexander was 16, he was facing hard time for robbery, burglary, and kidnapping. He was transferred to Rikers Island to await sentencing. But as soon as he arrived, he attacked 2 other inmates.
I stabbed them, honestly, for no reason, just to make a statement.
He was sent to solitary confinement for nearly a year. The time alone was sobering.
I'm 17 years old, and I have nothing. And this is how this ends. I think I was at the lowest that I could be.
Alexander's aunt, Vilma, worked at Rikers as a youth counselor.
Tell him, listen, you've tried everything else. Why don't you try Jesus?
So she began to be my voice of reason because I had no choice but to listen. Here I am.
One of the guards at the prison also got Alexander's attention.
There was just something about him that really appealed to me. And I said, man, this guy he's really into Jesus. You know, this God thing, he's really into that. I could look right in his eyes and I would see complete peace. I didn't have that. I wanted that. I didn't even know where to start. So I started with the Christian officer.
Alexander planned to dispute the charges against him. But when he went to court to be sentenced, something unusual happened.
When I walked in, I heard a voice saying, they're gonna give you 9 years. You are to take it. When I heard that voice, I do remember saying to myself, who's that? Who's speaking to me? And when I look up, the courtroom had behind the judge, "In God We Trust." The word God shot like rays of light, came out the word God and came into me, like into my mind.
The judge agreed to lower his sentence from 21 years to 9 if Alexander pled guilty.
I knew God was talking to me. So without even thinking about what was told to me, I had pleaded guilty very quickly. I said, yes, I did it. And the next thing I know, I'm being whisked away.
When he got back to his cell, Alexander wrote a letter to his aunt, explaining what had just happened.
I'm telling her how I believe God wants me to change, but I'm really having a hard time making that transition. But I know that I need to, and I'm beginning to want to, because I want to go to heaven. When I wrote the word because, Jesus Christ came in my cell, and he speaks to my right ear, follow me. And I lifted my hand, and when I said I accept, it felt like things were breaking off of me. And I felt so peaceful, I fell asleep.
When he woke up the next day, he was a changed man.
Cigarettes, the pornography, the cursing, everything instantaneously left me. And I lived for Jesus behind prison walls.
As Alexander studied the Bible, God became more than just a powerful force he feared.
I read Romans chapter 8, where it says we have the spirit of adoption, where we cry, Abba, Father. I clearly remember that day having a problem calling God Father. I realized that my relationship with the Lord is based on me loving him, not fearing him. And I began to love him to this day. Just, he's my father. He's everything that I have.
Today, Alexander is married. He's also an author and now serves the same neighborhood he once terrorized. Alexander's family now attends his church, and his aunt Vilma is amazed at the change in him.
Nothing's impossible especially when God is in the mix. He's a different person. He really is. He really, really is.
Make the transition, surrender to the Lord. He'll radically change your life.
Make the transition, surrender to the Lord, and He will radically transform your life. Those are wonderful words, and they're words of truth spoken from experience. Here's someone who said, I want to be evil. I want to do that. Most people don't ever get that far. There's a real curious paradox in life, and that is when you try to be good, and you try to do things on your own, check all the boxes and I'm going to be good, you're going to find it's going to be very hard to fulfill that. There's going to be something that you do wrong. There's going to be a mistake. There's going to be something you wish you hadn't done. The other side of it, when you try to be evil, you can actually have a lot of success there. And you can go. You can go so far you end up in prison where you want to stab people for no reason at all. And that's exactly what happened to him. But at the end of that, he realized, well, I want to go to heaven. I need that. Now, he had dramatic encounters. He heard voices. He saw light. He had several spiritual experiences. Well, here's some great news. You can have that too. God's no respecter of persons. He wants to show up for you. The Bible talks about Him manifesting Himself. Literally it means turning on the light so that you can see and you can understand. Now, if you've been living life away from God and you've been wondering, have I gone too far? Let this story encourage you. No, you haven't gone too far. God still loves you. You're still His child. He put His breath in you, and He wants a dream for you. You may have given up on that dream, but God hasn't given up on that dream. To get it, to get what you just saw happen, here's what you do. You ask for it. You pray a very simple prayer, and you let God do all the rest. When I talk surrender, I mean total surrender. That you're willing to say, God, no matter what it takes, whatever I have to do, I want to do. I want to follow you all the days of my life. I'm all in with you. This isn't something where you play a joke on God. No, this is something when you're serious and your heart's there, well, then God comes in and He does the rest. So if this is for you, don't turn away. Let today be the day where you have your encounter with God, where you say, yes, I want you in my life. If this is you, pray with me right now. Let's do this together. Jesus. That's right. Just say His name. Say it out loud. Jesus. I come to you and I surrender all. I'm tired of the way I'm living now. And I want to change. I want to change from my innermost being and live for you. So I open the door of my heart. I ask that you come in. I ask that you forgive me, that you make me new. And Jesus, if you do this for me, I want to follow you all the days of my life. Hear my prayer, for I pray it in Jesus' name. If you prayed with me, give us a call and let us know. 1-800-700-7000. Here's a word from Romans. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption,